Mega Man, Jimmy Easy. Come on.
Welcome to Advocacy Help Desk, a network of advocacy leaders sharing best practices and new ideas via this free podcast to help everyone in government affairs get better at their advocacy craft and having a lot of fun while doing it. Now to today's great show.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the Advocacy Help Desk. I am your co-host, Brian Fratkin, founder and CEO of Spark Influence, a leading industry advocacy tool. Today, I'm really excited about this episode. It's been a few weeks. We miss everybody. A quick background on the Advocacy Help Desk. We are a group of advocacy professionals that are here to help you. The beauty of this is it's a lot of questions and answers and folks coming in and saying, you know, how do I do this or how do I do that? And all those good things in between. And so with that, today's episode is no different. I'm really excited that Jean is on the show today and we'll be talking about that. But first, to introduce our other co-host, Nick DeSarno from the Public Affairs Council. It is always good to see you, sir. How are you today?
Good. Thank you, Brian, for doing a lovely intro again. I almost had to do one of these by myself, and I was so nervous that I backed out. And so it's always great to have some, additional help leading these.
Happy to do so. So talk to us a little bit more about who we have on the show today.
I'm really excited to have someone that has been a council favorite for one of our presenters that we continually go to because she is our in-house kind of writing expert, Jean Card. And Jean has been a speechwriter for 3 cabinet secretaries. I thought it was 2, 3, including the Attorney General at one point. She's also worked in association life. She worked at NFIB, leading their communications team. And now she runs her own consultancy where she helps folks with their writing and communications needs, specifically kind of in the speech writing, op-ed, advocacy, policy issue areas. And she's been a frequent Public Affairs Council speaker. And so we are really excited to have her on the podcast. I don't know, Jean, you also have your own podcast, which has got me thinking about why we really need to have you on. But did I miss anything in the introduction?
No, thank you, Nick. I think you gave a good overview. Yeah, that's one of the reasons I love speaking to the Public Affairs Council so much is because, I share that background that so many people in that room have, right? That I've done the association side, the government side. And it's really why I moved to Washington in the first place. When I first came out of college, I moved straight here from New England because advocacy is really what I was interested in. And I thought at the time it was politics. And the longer I worked here, the more I realized that it was specifically advocacy, which, a lot of people outside the Beltway don't necessarily think about that difference, which I didn't grow up here, but I see the difference now. And I know that that's what's suited to me. Advocacy is kind of what turns me on.
When you say they don't see that difference, what difference do you, I'd love to hear it. What difference do you see? What is the sort of defining characteristic of each of those different ones and what draws you more to advocacy in this case?
Advocacy to me is more, it's about issues and it's more real. Like you actually, if you're involved in advocacy and you win, right? If you win a campaign, we use a lot of the same words. An advocacy campaign means that policy and government will actually change, and therefore people's lives will actually improve. Versus the political side with a political campaign. If you win a political campaign, if your candidate wins, it's amazing and thrilling. But nothing actually changes until the policy work is done. And that's where you change lives and hopefully make the world a better place. I mean, it sounds so corny, but that really is what a lot of people came to Washington to do, right?
I love that. And I know you worked at NFIB and they are really steeped in advocacy. They really kind of have that grassroots membership, and I work a lot with them, and NFIB is a member and attend our events. And I love talking to them because they're so kind of close to their members. What were some of the kind of communication challenges that you were facing at that time, and how have things changed since you've left the in-house advocacy association work that you did?
Yeah, that's a great question. I left and I worked at NFIB twice. Once in the 90s, actually. I worked there, I think it was 94 to 2000. That's when I joined the Bush administration as an appointee. And then after the Bush administration, I actually went back to NFIB. And then when I finally left NFIB the second time for good, it was to become an NFIB member, right? Because now I'm self-employed and now I belong to NFIB as a member, which is kind of fun. It's such an important association, and their membership, I always say it's my favorite association membership in Washington, which is easy, I guess, because who doesn't love small business? But it goes deeper than that for me. I grew up in a small business family. I watched my father get laid off from his job when I was 9 years old. It was a very scary time, and he and his colleagues decided to start their own business since they had all gotten laid off. So from a very young age, I watched someone build a business, build a clientele, and it just became part of who I was. It also is what got my family interested in politics and policy, actually. So to have spent so much of my career at NFIB advocating for the self-employed and small business owners was very personally meaningful to me. It's always a frustration in Washington. I think this is true on both sides of the aisle. I think most people appreciate the importance of and the beauty of small business, but it is hard to get the attention of the right people in a town that is awash in money and PAC donations. I mean, I'm going to be really blunt. It is hard for the little ones, the little businesses that don't have as much money. And NFIB tries to get them all together and get more money and impress at fundraisers, but it's very tough to be a small business advocate in a town that is enamored still with big business, and the big businesses just keep getting bigger.
Especially during COVID. I mean, I'm looking at Main Street and it's like, this is hard to survive in this environment when there's, not nearly as many people participating in that kind of economy. It's all online. And I wonder, I doubt, we look at startups, which are essentially small businesses, right? They just have such a different culture than what NFIB originally was, where it was really for those mom and pop businesses. And now, startups are given $50 million immediately from a venture capitalist fund, and they're very, very different.
Yeah, the nature of the beast has definitely changed. I'm trying to remember, it's been so many years now, but the average NFIB member or typical certainly had fewer than 10 employees, and they were very representative of the small business population at large. But it really, no matter the sector, I mean, you can have a landscaping company, you can be a plumber, you can be a small retailer. Like there are it's all these different sectors, but they all, when you're really small and you just have a few employees, you have some things in common culturally. And yeah, they're a fun membership to work for. But yeah, what does a small business mean, and what does entrepreneur mean today? I mean, these things are changing all the time with the rapid change of technology.
And how has kind of like the communications realm changed, especially specifically for associations, since were in-house and then you move now to be more of a consultant?
Yeah, it was with NFIB members in particular, we always struggled to reach them. Everybody wants to use email, right? When you're doing grassroots advocacy. When I first worked at NFIB in the 90s, we were still using fax. Okay. And that's how NFIB actually came to become a grassroots powerhouse. It was during the time of what is referred to now as Clinton care, right? Or Hillary care, when Bill Clinton was president and Hillary was kind of the leader of the healthcare reform movement. And it was NFIB that really said, oh, hell no, because they knew there were mandates and such that were going to make health insurance too expensive for them to afford anymore. And they've always struggled with the cost of health insurance. And at that time, NFIB turned on their grassroots, and those members, probably three or 400,000 at the time, I believe, they started faxing congressional offices with letters that said, don't do this. This is how it will impact my business. And they were like melting down fax machines on Capitol Hill. And a lot of people will say actually that the NFIB invented grassroots advocacy, and it all started with the fax machine. So fast forward to my next tenure, I got back there in like 2010, I guess. And the membership was not answering our emails. because they don't sit on their computers all day like we do. Right. So we send out email after email. Oh, better graphics. Oh, better message. Oh, urgency, stand on our heads. But we were appealing to a membership that was in their truck, that was in their warehouse, that was interacting with customers and clients and employees. It was really hard to get their attention. And I think that's probably challenging for a lot of people who are working on grassroots. If you're trying to reach an activist base that doesn't sit in front of a computer all day, how do you get to them? And at the time, we were talking a little bit about reaching people through their phones, through text. But I think there were some legal challenges around that. You might know more than I do, you guys, how people are doing this. Is it still primarily email, or are there other ways that people are ginning up the grassroots?
I mean, Brian, this is your.
Yeah, sure. I mean, Gene, you bring up a good point. It's there's no one way for any association. I mean, that's the definite truth is email, email is dead, long live email, right? It's come and gone and it's still here. And now with the advent of smartphones and everything else, it's a lot easier to reach folks by email because they have their phones with them a lot of the time. But text messaging in much the same way, social media, and it's a real challenge for a lot of associations to figure out what's the method that's going to work best for my people. And so, there is no one way. And I know that folks come in and say, we're going to send a ton of email without thinking about, let's ask people what they want first and figure out what works best for all of our group. But it's really, it's fascinating to see just how folks are taking that approach and going in different directions. I love
and add podcasting too, right? Add podcasting to the ways that you can reach your audience.
Without a doubt.
Yeah,
we've seen success with that. There are a number of great podcasts out there. Toyota, FDRA, American Dental Association, a whole bunch of different groups all over the place doing fantastic podcasts of just breaking down the larger issues for their general folks who may be listening on a car ride into work or dropping kids off to school or while they're working. And it's been amazing to see the rise of podcasts in the association space. They're still launching to this day and they're still being very successful for their targeted group. It's fantastic. I want to circle back for a second because I love just how you introduced yourself. And I think that is one of the great ways that associations and advocacy groups in general just need to humanize their issues. And I think it comes back to that speech writing thing that you're so good at, is just simply saying, when you introduced yourself a minute ago, you talked about, you made the story personal. You brought us in with, hi, I'm Gene, I'm from here. And, my parents did X. And that's how I got into this, was I saw it firsthand, right? Those are the kind of stories that we know move people. How, I tell you right now, it got me interested in it, and it increases your sort of bona fides and everything else of like, I'm authentic. This is who I am. This is, you don't say it, but this is why you should listen to me kind of concept. How do we build that kind of, gravitas and importance with associations who too often go with we got to tell everybody everything. And if we don't put it all in a 10-page PDF, or we don't tell every single line of what we want to get across to those people, they're never going to listen to us. And this is the only chance we have. How do you start to break those barriers down of, okay, let's think about this in a better way. How do we talk about our issues so that people will want to listen to us? And how do we bring in those personal stories that are going to make a difference?
Yeah, it's really
a big question, Gene. I'm sorry.
It is a big question, but it's an important one. I mean, it's and a lot of the work that I do today as a consultant. I mean, I'm still writing speeches and ghostwriting op-eds and things like that. I'm still very much a writer, but my clients have turned to me more and more for communications coaching, and I help them with their mindset around communications, because what people get very, very tight in their mindset. That's what you're describing. They think things have to be done a certain way. There's this sense of urgency and stress and pressure, getting all the information out, making all the points, when in fact, it's better to be relaxed and to be human. Right. I mean, we've got enough of machines in our world at this point. To be human and to share something that is, what I shared with you is a little bit intimate, right? I was telling you, I was a kid. I saw my dad lose his job. Like all of a sudden I am a person, and I came to this career with a very specific perspective. But a lot of people are afraid to be vulnerable in that way and to share something personal. And then if you're an association staffer, maybe you need someone in your membership to share something personal. And so it becomes part of the advocacy work, part of the persuasion that we engage in is persuading people to share a human story. And it just is as true as anything in the course of time that here we are with all of this technology available to us. We have so many different ways to do things, but what still appeals to an audience is the same as it was 20, 30, 40 years ago, which is a story about a person. I mean, frankly, that's what social media is, using human interaction as its fuel. Mm-hmm. I mean, the most, social media is the most modern form of communication, or it's become so popular as a form of communication. Why is it so engaging? Why do people get so hooked on it? Because it's stories of people, and we like people. We're social creatures. We're just built that way.
Yeah.
I love that. We have, I used to watch or listen to This American Life podcast, which is still one of my favorite podcasts. Yeah. And the New York Times, kind of the Daily, took that, and I've gotten, there's your puppy. I've gotten lucky enough. I've gotten lucky enough to have like the creator of the Daily on for a council event and talk to him, and just, it was wonderful to hear how different that kind of perspective of telling a story and hearing direct from the person is now, and how much it's been accepted even from news organizations who are constantly thinking of how do we remain unbiased, and how do they're now becoming closer to their sources. They're letting their sources speak for themselves to show that this is authentically what's happening.
I mean, one of the best parts of a news story have always been the quotes, right?
Right. Yeah. It's spot on, and it's something that you don't necessarily think about. It just comes naturally to you that you're right. When you read a news story, the call outs and quotes are specifically call outs in that way, because it adds that extra flavor that if I'm not going to read the whole thing, here's something that I can attest to, that I can look at, that I can say, this is a real person saying these things. Hopefully.
And the language itself is different.
Yes, definitely.
The language itself, it's almost, I mean, it's all English in the news that we all are reading, but the spoken word has you make different choices in your words, in your length of sentence. Mm-hmm. The spoken word is different, and that stands out in print or pixels.
So what are some of those coaching techniques then that you're using? Please don't give away the farm, as they say, but what are some of those coaching techniques that you're using when folks come to you and say, look, it's clear we're not reaching our people, or I'm afraid to say X, Y, and Z, or I don't know how to get our point across. What are some of those bullet points that you're saying, okay, look, think about these three things, or what are some of those things you're thinking about or talking to them about?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I really like to back people up even further at their moment of frustration when they're turning to me and saying, I don't think I'm an effective spokesperson, or I don't think I'm an effective public speaker. I need help. They think that I'm going to come in and tell them some, tactics, like do 1, 2, 3, use these types of words, use the, pivot and all. And that's all true and good. But I like to back it up further to figure out how they got to where they are, how they feel, why they feel like they're stuck at the podium or the microphone, or wherever they are on the phone with a reporter, and figure out what's, generally speaking, a client is going to have some unhelpful thinking going on about what they're doing. Mm-hmm. Okay. They have some kind of fear or, pressure they're putting on themselves. So I like to back it up all the way there, and then just ask them realistically, so do you believe in what you're doing? Oh my God, I love what I do. I like to get them in touch with what they love about it. Is it important? And I'll say, is it important that you get this message to the right audience? Oh, it's incredibly important. If Congress doesn't hear us in the right way on this, okay, we'll bring that. Gosh, you really care about this, don't you? I like to get them in touch. Sure. with why they're doing what they're doing, because I have the great fortune to work with people who are passionate about what they do, and they really are cause oriented, and it's beautiful. And when I want to tap into that and get them back in touch with the love of it, instead of the fear, the pressure, the intensity, get it all done, be the best performer, crush the game. And if you get people to sort of break down and get back in touch with those feelings of why why are you doing this? Why are you here? Why do you care so much? It really changes the way people deliver their message.
And one of the things that I love that you talk about when you do this is, how to be brief, or how brevity is so important. I know you have some kind of tactics around that, but that's something that I'm always looking at. Like, I got an advocacy email the other day, and it was like, it took me 14 phone scrolls to get to the take action,
to get to the unsubscribe button is what I hear.
Exactly. And I'm thinking, I know your audience, and I'm like, I don't think they're reading all of this. They're pretty busy people.
Oh my God.
How do you help people cut down on that?
Yeah, that's great. Now, this is the bad cop of Gene Card Inc. Okay, I just showed you guys the good cop, where I'm like, be good to yourself. Think about how you feel. Get in touch with the love and the beauty. Blah, blah, blah. And then when they go on too long, or they turn in something that's just too many words, or to be spoken, or printed, or pixelated, I say, no, too long. Cut it in half. Cut it in half again. You do not need to make that point. I mean, this is the bad cop, right? I mean, length is the number one killer of messaging. I mean, it's just messaging death. Like that what you just described, Nick, was so powerful. We've all received the emails that we scroll and scroll. It looks gray. If your electronic message looks gray, you've lost. It's not going to break through. It's over. This is just human nature. So yes, I am kind and touchy-feely about a lot of the work and how I help my clients. But when it comes to word count and cutting, I am brutal. I take no prisoners. Cut it, and then cut it some more.
So what are your thoughts then? Where do you start with that? I mean, yes, obviously easy to tell somebody, wow, this is way too long. But when you're going back to them to say that, what are you sort of asking them to cut, or what are you sort of asking them to concentrate on to get that brevity? Because I love it. Brevity. Yes, absolutely. Bullet points are all over my emails. Yes. How do we, what are you telling folks to look at when it comes to cutting down?
Well, start big and go small. I mean, you can look at, is every page necessary?
Small.
Okay. Is every page necessary? Is every paragraph necessary? And then you get down to is every sentence necessary? Is every word in that sentence necessary? There's one way to approach it. You can also do the math. I'm a big fan of word count. This is how I challenge myself. I've written so many op-eds, and I wrote a column under my own name for US News for many years. So I've written, I guess I did that 4 years. I wrote a column every week. And then of course I ghost wrote for my cabinet members. I ghost wrote for my clients. I think I've probably written 1,000 op-eds easily. Op-eds really have to be a certain length, right? And so the word count challenge, I have to turn into a game. If you have, so you give yourself a word count challenge, right? If it's not an op-ed, you might feel like, oh, it can be as long as I want because it's electronic. We're not even buying ink or paper. But give yourself a limit, use word count, and use the math, and say, cut by 1/3, right? Okay. And then cut by 1/3 again. Sometimes if people need like a real concrete number to aim for, sure, that can be helpful.
Mm-hmm. And I love the idea of an op-ed. I still read op-eds. I don't know if I'm the only one, but clearly organizations still find them impactful. And I remember one of my first jobs, I think I was 17. I worked for a state legislator. I might have just turned 18 by the time they got elected. Was like those press clippings, like making sure this was when there was like local newspapers, like every town in New Jersey had their own local newspaper, which does not exist anymore, unfortunately. And we would just, make sure that the two assembly members and the state senator knew all of that stuff. How long does an op-ed kind of need to be? And do you think they're still, useful?
I do think they're useful. I mean, they're actually a great, because they are short, and I would say for online publication now we're probably in the 600 word range for an online.
That's hard to do.
It is very hard to do, and it'll be a challenge for anyone who's trying to do it and get one placed. But the benefit of going through that struggle and getting to your message in 600 words, you're going to refine your own message through the process of doing it. You actually come to a better messaging place. I mean, the process of writing a good, solid op-ed can get an entire organization more focused on what the message really is. And if you are lucky enough to get it picked up, you've got a link that you can share with the world right? That's why advocacy professionals like op-eds so much, because it's not even they care about who comes across it by chance. They want to send the link to their target audience or audiences. And guess what? It's something that someone might actually read because it's only 600 or 700 words.
Yeah, and it's that third party, like, authentication that you need, like, oh, the New York Times, even if they don't necessarily agree with me, they're thinking my argument is valid enough to be, and
yes, you get that third party validation. It's true. It's like, oh, if an editor at this big publication thought this was a good piece, maybe I should read it. That still matters to people.
I highly implore people that are doing any of this type of work to look to someone like Gene Card to help them with it, because I've seen so many bad op-eds, places that I've worked at, currently work at. It is everyone, even if you're a great writer, op-eds are so specific and it's so hard to get placed, even in not a top tier. I'm not talking about New York Times or Wall Street Journal, any of those types of things. Those are near impossible. I think they get like 700 submissions a day. Like, unless you're the Pope, you're probably not going to have a good chance of getting placed there.
That's right.
But, even in the other, smaller newspapers and outlets that still or online outlets, it's still incredibly difficult. And so putting your time and energy into an op-ed that never even has a chance, I always hate to see that and be like, well, I always look at an op-ed and it's like, oh, this is 1,400 words. So I'm like, that's never, going to get published anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, it's so true. Like it's not an easy thing to write, and it's so hard to get published in a reputable outlet. And if you turn in something that is not well written, this is another situation. You've already lost the battle. Right. You've already lost the battle. Like, don't turn in crap. I mean, I talk to so many people who've worked in politics and advocacy forever. They still don't know really what an op-ed is, right? A lot of people you work with will say, well, we should write an article. Okay, what do you mean by an article? Often they mean an op-ed, right? Often they mean an op-ed. Wait a second, didn't the New York Times just recently change what they call it?
Oh, no.
Did they call it? They did. Yeah, they're calling it something else now, or either it may have been the Washington Post. One of the big papers decided to call it something else, because op-ed, of course, meant opposite the editorial page, and nobody reads hard copy papers anymore. Right. I think they're actually calling it guest commentary or something like that, which frankly is more, maybe that's seems more, it's more helpful, right? It's more descriptive.
I mean, and then kind of transitioning, I know you mentioned it already, podcast, but you've worn so many hats, right? You've done this ghostwriting and writing consulting, and now you're also doing a podcast. What kind of made you decide to jump into the podcasting realm, and what are some kind of key takeaways that you offer people, as now I feel like everyone and their mother has a podcast?
Yeah, I'm such a joiner, right? But I feel very, very strongly about it. I mean, I wanted to become a podcaster because I started listening to podcasts, and I really agreed with what I heard one of them say once, which was that podcasting is a revolution in human communication, and perhaps the biggest revolution since the Gutenberg printing press, because that made messages and words available to a mass audience in a way that was unprecedented in human history. And here we are again at a moment that the spoken word, so the printing press enabled proliferation of the written word, and now we have proliferation of the spoken word. Oh, they're coming for me, guys. Can you hear the sirens? I've done nothing wrong, I swear. Hope everyone's okay. But the spoken word is able to proliferate in a whole new way. Is a podcast a lot like a talk radio show? Yes, it is. This is true. But this very key difference that you can listen to it anywhere, anytime, and choose exactly the type of content that you want. Listen to long form, short form, stories, interviews. I mean, it's just incredible. And I frankly love that that we listen through earbuds. I think it's a very intimate form of communication, that the voice is literally in your head. It just appeals to me in so many ways. So I was inspired by listening to podcasts and thinking, this is clear, it's been clear for years now. It's a trend, it's an exploding trend. Yes, everybody wants to have one, but I guess I'm just arrogant enough to think that I could do it a little bit better than most people. And I had some friends who had started their own podcast called Bipartisan, which eventually became my podcast, who wanted to have a bipartisan conversation about politics. And they had come up with this cute title for the show, Bipartisan, like podcast, and a great logo and a great concept of a discussion about policy and politics that was friendly and productive and in search of common ground instead of the typical fight, name calling, hyperbole that you see, particularly on cable news. And so that appealed to me as well, that this was a medium where you could do something. If there was something that really bugged you, you thought, oh, all that's out there is this anger and this shouty. Like I've done TV commentary too, but like, it's not really for me because I'm so nice, right? Like I'll tell you, I feel strongly about the way I feel, but it's not my inclination to attack someone else. I want to advocate for my side, and passionately so, for what I believe in, but I don't want to beat up my opponent. And that, when I started podcasting, I had a desire to be a public commentator, but I didn't have a desire to throw punches at the other side. Well, if you're not a punch thrower, you better start your own show. So that's what I did.
I love that. I love that podcasting is now one of the last places that you can have this kind of open dialogue, that it's not immediately turned to, name calling and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a safe haven for civil discourse.
Yeah. And I think about how some of my favorite conversations sometimes are spurred on by podcasts that I listen to, that I was thinking like, oh, that is a really interesting point, and that person didn't really have it fully formed, and now I'm also thinking about it throughout my day, and then I talk to someone about it. It can be really a great form of kind of engaging around policy issues. And so I love your podcast, and I think it'd be great to see more podcasts that are not just also one-sided, where you listen to Pod Save America, and while I love them, and they're also a bunch of former speechwriters, right? They all have the same or very similar perspective, right? So there's not even very much of an argument. It's just kind of like when during the Trump presidency, it was just kind of an outlet, right, for them. And so I constantly think of, how can I like to feel like a little fly on the wall, listening to a really interesting conversation that I'm then going to take and kind of put into my life. That's where I think those are my favorite types of podcasts, especially in the policy area. I did listen to an 80 episode Revolutions podcast. That might be my favorite one, but yeah, I love like history, and I do fall asleep to those, but
yeah. I mean, Gene, this is great. I really, I appreciate sort of the different aspects here that we talk about when it comes to effective, not just speech writing, but just communication, and just the idea that humanizing the issues and humanizing the data. Because the other flip side too that we see a lot of is, for a lot of years there was a whole make an infographic and put together an infographic and put all of your data points on this infographic and then hand it to somebody. And that too led itself astray, because much like the 10-page PDF or the, cut that in half and half again, this was, these were just numbers without any sort of context, and stats are great, but if we can't so how do you discuss that concept there? Just sort of one more question here of, we're talking about authentication, just authenticity alongside just the personal story and making it brief. But how do you then bring in some of those stats as well and leverage sort of the storytelling alongside the numbers telling concept there?
Sure. I think it can be, I think you got to sneak it in, right? If you're telling a story about, Mary Jo, who, it's easy for me to use small business as an example. Mary Jo has a general contracting business, and she took it over from her dad when he got really sick and couldn't do it anymore. She never thought she'd be a contractor, but today she is. And she's like 80% of other contractors that are struggling to pay their health insurance premiums. Sure. See how I snuck that in there?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's
you sneak it in.
I like it. So it's the idea of, I guess, don't rely on necessarily one or the other, but work the two together into an overall story of what you're trying to accomplish. Is that sort of what what the concept is?
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't, I mean, we understand that you need to get the data in there. And I do think that a good poll is interesting. But think about how when we read poll results too, it's always the top line that's the most interesting to people. You just understand that. Like this, a lot of this is about, for us as advocates, it's about acceptance. It's about acceptance that our audience is very busy and very overwhelmed, and they just don't really have time for us. And think of ourselves, put ourselves in their shoes. What do you have time for? What do you have the patience to read? What's most interesting to you? How do you consume a piece of data hungrily versus, oh God, no more data, I'm so full, right? Put yourself in the shoes of your audience.
I think it's really important. It's almost like, especially with media relations that I work with people, I'm always telling them, like, your audience are people who are under deadline. They want a story, and you just gave them something that they would have to read for like an hour and a half to find any. Yeah, right. Like, and so I'm like,
you burdened them. You burden them. Try not to burden your audience. One of my favorite pushbacks comes from all the lawyers in Washington, right? A lot of lawyers. We're lousy with lawyers. And I'll say, keep it simpler, tell a story, blah, blah, my usual. No, the audience that day is going to be lawyers. They're going to want to hear a legal brief. You know what? No, they're not. They're actually human beings, and they do not want to listen to an oral legal brief. I promise you, they don't.
Right. And I think that goes through with a lot of things that we do, right? When you watch the latest iPhone commercials, right, it's not talking about the specs at all. It's talking about what you can do with it and all the great movies you can make and the photos that you can share with your family. And it's things of that sort where, sure, they could put together an ad of all their specs, and certain folks would go, ooh, but overall, it's more of just the story behind why we did this and what we want you to get out of this and how you can use it or how you can build upon it, right?
That's an awesome example. And I think Apple is just the master at sort of marketing and images, and what they're selling is not, they're not selling the specs, they're selling the feeling of what it is to have a great piece of technology in your life and who that makes you, right? I read something the other day about branding and marketing and all the examples were companies like Apple. Nike was another one. Like, Nike didn't tell you what the shoe was made of. Sure. Right. Nike put you in touch with the exhilaration of having a great workout or the thrill of victory. They put you in touch with those feelings. And that's what we're all doing in advocacy communications. Get people in touch with feelings.
I love it. That's Gene, you've given us so much good information today and some great sort of pull quotes, right? But, don't burn your audience and sell the feeling, not the specs. Start big and go small, cut and cut again. I have a page full of notes as always.
Excellent.
But it's, I really do appreciate sort of the view into just be yourself and find your passion and talk about that, and don't make it too ornate. Keep it simple, and sure, those questions may come and then you'll have a chance to prep for those too, but don't start there. Start with the feeling of it all and get to the rest of it in the future. I think that's fantastic.
Well summarized, Brian. You're hired.
I'm just trying to take your bullet points here and run with them. Gene, one more time, if you wouldn't mind plugging your podcast, because I'm definitely going to tune in and subscribe myself.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's called Bipodisan. That's BIPODISAN, and it's on all the major podcast platforms. And it's civil discourse, but it is about politics. Thank you for.
I think we need a lot more of that. Well,
appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Nick. Do you have any parting words?
I just want to thank Jean, and she just did a speechwriting webinar for the Public Affairs Council. So if you are a member, you can get it for free. You can go and download it after. It's on demand. But Jean's always been such a lovely person to work with, and I'm always learning from her. So I appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you, Nick. We are kindred spirits, my brother. I like talking to you too.
This is wonderful. Gene, thank you again. Nick, it is always great to see you. And again, if you're not a member of the council, please become a member of the council in this industry. Also, if you're looking for a job, pac.org/jobs, we always like to push that. It is the largest database of jobs in the industry. Some great things. I was just there yesterday taking a look at things that were just, randoms. It's fantastic. So for the Advocacy Help Desk, always great. If you do have a question, by all means, write to us, subscribe to us. We're on all the platforms. We love talking about all the issues. If you have an idea, submit it to our website or write to one of us personally. And until then, in the words of Andy Polk, keep advocating.